And we will start with David Ferrones of the Sun Sentinel. David, if you have a question for Coach Diaz.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Coach. How you doing? Been a while, been a long time. First of all, I want to ask if there's any updates on if there have been any opt-outs. I know that's going on around college football, and anyone unavailable due to injury or otherwise that you could tell us about.
David, good to hear from you. As of right now, we expect our entire team to be available when we begin practice. I mean, obviously, we're in such a fluid situation, and we're aware of that. But we've had a great summer of workouts so far, and we're excited to get going tomorrow.
Great. Next up, we have David Lake from 24/7 Sports. David, if you had a question for Coach Diaz.
Hey, Coach. I mainly just wanted to ask you about the decision to officially name D'Eriq King the starting quarterback. I guess it was kind of just a formality, but you still went ahead and did it. I guess just, why?
Well, I think it's unfair to call it a formality. I think that would diminish his efforts, and even though we only got in 4 spring practices, we certainly, especially when the team came back on campus this summer, there's still a lot of other things going on. I mean, not to mention even the Zoom meetings when we were in shelter in place, and just I think a lot of the qualities that D'Eriq had demonstrated throughout the year, we felt like when we got into the walkthrough period, and we felt like when we got into right now, ultimately with training camp, is that we needed someone for our offense to rally around. I mean, we've been talking about it for a long time. Miami having a quarterback that the entire locker room believes in, and there's been great strides from the other quarterbacks, but we just felt like it was important for there to be one voice, a leader that could hold everybody on the offense accountable, like all good offenses have. You got to have that guy at that quarterback position.
Coach, next up we have Matt Shodell from canesport.com. Matt, if you could ask Coach Diaz.
Yeah, hey Manny, this is a little bit different. I appreciate you doing it. I want to ask you, the ACC obviously gave out some recommendations for game weeks and how to deal with, testing and things like that. Do you anticipate this being like a quote unquote normal fall practice with the usual drills, the 11 on 11s, or do you get recommendations separately from the ACC, from your own medical staff on let's try to practice this way or anything like that?
We've had, it's a great question, and certainly our league has worked very closely with the CDC. We're so lucky here at the University of Miami because we're led by an expert. I can't speak for other universities, but no one's got a public health expert leading their institution like we do with Dr. Frank. So with his office, our medical community, again, we're blessed to be a great medical community in our university. I actually just got off of a call with a member of our medical community right before this call. So on one hand, yes, I mean, we're certainly going to be right lock in step with the ACC in terms of their medical guidelines, but I would imagine, like everybody, of course, we're doing different things. I mean, if you've been here for the summer for workouts, the walkthrough period that we just came out of, the way we'll be at practice, I mean, there's going to be all kinds of things that are going to be different. And I think our players, to their credit, have embraced that. They see that we are putting their safety first. And they understand that things are a little bit different, but they, like I said, they've done their part, and we've been very pleased with the way that the workouts have gone all summer.
Great. Coach, with Manny Navarro from The Athletic. Manny, if you have a question for Coach Diaz.
Hey, Coach Diaz. I hope you're doing well. Kind of a follow-up to that last question. Do you have sort of like a calendar in mind of when things might ramp up? For instance, we always knew there was a certain day when you guys would get to tackling and so forth. Is that going to be a part of this camp at all at a certain point? And I guess as far as like maybe separating first team and second team guys, to protect against maybe widespread, issues with the virus should it enter, is there anything in particular you're doing with that?
Well, one thing we've done is we've done some research, and we went back, we watched our practices from the spring when, of course, we weren't thinking about, social distancing and what a close contact is. And I hadn't seen the study done. So what we did was we took every play in practice. We took, I think, probably 2 or 3 players at every position. And we just started a stop clock or a stopwatch. every time they came within a 6-foot bubble of one of their teammates. And so if Manny came within 6 feet of Matt, we logged it, Manny and Matt, and then we started on the clock. And when you do that, it was actually fascinating in a practice when we weren't trying to be socially distanced. I mean, this was just a 2-hour practice we had back in March. Number one, how few players a football player actually comes in close contact with during the course of a 2-hour practice. I think there's at times a mentality that, every play sort of ends with a 22-man pile. And what the data showed is that that's not really the case. As you would expect, your lineman would have the greatest close contacts. But if you just, I don't know if you wanted to guess right now in a 2-hour practice, I think we had one pair of an offensive and defensive lineman that came in contact with each other for right at 4 minutes. Most of their number one contact was in the 2-minute period. And when you got to our skill guys, we had starting wide receivers that weren't in close contact for 20, 30 seconds. When you think about a football play lasting 4 to 6 seconds, right? And then how many plays do you get in the course of a practice? I'm talking about offense versus defense. The answer might be somewhere in the low 30s. Do the math. It's not a great number. Now, obviously that contact is different than, walking down the street and passing somebody. But so I think when you really take a look at in terms of how many players actually would have would come into contact with other players, I think you can sort of plan your practices accordingly. To answer your question and the other parts half of your question there, Manny, we are not in school this next week, so we will have more similar to a training camp style. But then we've got an extra week of practice, so we'll end up getting the same amount of practices maybe that you would have had in a 4-week run up to your first game in the 5 weeks that we do have. But we'll have our scrimmages. We'll do things. We still have to get the team ready to play. So tackling and those type of things, we won't do that much differently than we would in any other year. I think what the difference will be now, everything else that you can control, except for the actual, ball when it's 11 on 11, that's where you'll see the distancing, the spread out, the way they get water, the way they stand, the way they do everything.
Coach, we have Susan Miller-Degnan from the Miami Herald. Susan, if you have a question for Coach Diaz. All right, we're going to come back to Susan. We'll go to David Hale of ESPN. David, if you had a question for Coach Diaz.
Hey, Manny, thanks for doing this. I guess you probably touched on this a little bit, but certainly Miami, the greater Miami area, has been one of the hot spots in terms of numbers over the last couple of weeks, few months. What have you done in terms of talking to your guys about sort of being careful about who they're interacting with, where they're going to, and how, I guess, feasible is sort of maintaining that players and coaches bubble as, you get more into things and more folks are back around and on campus?
Well, to your point, obviously the summer, the numbers for, a long time were not very good down here. And I do think without the ability to get into details because of our policy, I think the numbers that in the testing that we were able to do this summer with our players showed that, I think one of the most frustrating things about this virus is that it's controllable. You can slow down the spread. You can't necessarily bring it down to zero and prevent it, but certainly the numbers have shown that if we're smart in terms of who we allow in our bubble and whether that's mask wearing and this, the thing we've heard it over and over again, but it works. Our players know that it works. And they know that, how important, and we've got a very, stringent contact tracing program that our guys have gone through. And this is where we were able to follow the guidance of our medical community here on our campus. And that's why, again, I have a lot of praise for our players. But as we tell them, every time we go through a round of testing, it's very similar to a game. You're only as good as your next game. You're only as good as your next round of testing. And so they get that. And it is one of those deals where everybody on the team has a role to play. Because it may only take one. So like I said, I tip my hat to the way that they've handled the summer.
Coach, we're going to go back to Susan Miller-Degnan of the Miami Herald. Susan, you have a question for Coach Diaz.
Coach, sorry, I'm not great at Zoom yet. Anyway, I'm wondering, what you see as the strength of this team right now, and as far as the coronavirus, also, yeah, how often will you guys be testing players?
The strength of the team, it's too early to say right now. And we, as obviously we missed half of, 2/3 of spring practice, and I don't know that there's any segment on our football team walking around saying, hey, we're a strength of a team. We've got a team that is ready to compete, that realizes that they need to earn everything, and work for everything. And I will say the attitude of the guys all summer long has been really good, but that's what you would expect a coach to say at 130 schools right now. The second part of your question was,
I was just wondering how often the UM will be testing players.
Oh yeah, so we'll be right in line with the ACC. So again, once we get to competition, we'll be testing every week before competition, 72 hours before the game.
Okay.
Awesome. Coach, we're going to go to Matt Baker of the Tampa Bay Times. Matt, if you have a question for Coach Diaz.
Hey, Manny, you said a couple minutes ago that there are definitely some things that you are going to be doing differently practice-wise. Can you give another example or two, just so I understand what you're saying?
The simplest, just the way the team stretches, the way you stand when you're not in, when you're not in a drill, how you get your water, having your personalized, water bottle. There are drills that we've eliminated. There are things that we would have done in the past that, again, would have just, put a, that have put people in, in close contact that we're just simply not going to do. So, that's just all part of it.
What's a drill you've eliminated, if you don't mind?
Well, like for example, we won't be doing our big cane drill, this camp, where we'd sort of circle the team up and two guys kind of go in a one-on-one type blocking drill. It's just, there's not a place for that, at least here in 2020.
Awesome. Coach, we have Tom D'Angelo of the Palm Beach Post. Tom, if you have a question for Coach Diaz.
Here I am. Sorry, guys. Hey, Manny. Number one, Manny, are any of you guys, is UM requiring anybody to sign waivers?
No.
No. Okay. Secondly, with a season that there's such uncertainty that there could be stops and starts. You could go find out one morning you lose, that 10 guys can't practice. How has that been? How is that for coaching staff to kind of prepare for? How has that part been different for you guys?
Tom, can you ask that question again, just so I get it right?
In a season, it's going to be so much uncertainty, and there could be stops and starts. So you don't know. You might find out Monday you can't play Friday or Saturday. You might find out one morning that there's 8 guys who can't practice that day or that week. Are there different things you can, as a staff, do to prepare for those possible circumstances to mitigate, the damage it could do, or to mitigate, how difficult that could be?
Tom, that's been the whole theme of 2020. Since the second weekend in March, everything has been about stay loose and adjust. You've got a plan, and then suddenly that plan will change, and and you can only wake up and make the decisions that day for what you have that day. So I think that's just par for the course, and I think we've had a crash course over the last 4 months. So we're ready. We're ready for whatever comes.
Thank you.
Coach, we've got Christopher Stock from InsideTheU.com. Chris, if you have a question for Coach Diaz.
Hey, Coach, I was curious if there's anything that stands out to you for summer camp with your workouts from the team, any impressions you have with either players or team, just how things went the last, few weeks here.
I think, working backwards, there was a new deal this summer that we haven't had in the past, where we've had this walkthrough period, which gave us a great opportunity. We were fully in masks the whole time. Our offensive and defensive linemen used the 3-foot crunch balls in between, just so that we didn't get into any close contact during this period. But it gave our coaches on both sides of the ball a real good chance to install our offense and defensive schemes, something that you'd be doing for the first time in practice one. And, and then, just the mistakes that would come of especially not having a spring practice of kind of learning it on the run. So I think that ability to, have that, I think has really helped the team. I think their attitude's been fantastic in meetings and in that period. And again, Coach Feely, even just the way they came back, we brought 2/3 of the team back on June 15th and the rest back the 1st of July. And just the job the guys did of staying in shape when they weren't around us, I thought was really, really good. And they came back ready to work. And so I'm excited to get them out there tomorrow.
Awesome. Coach, we have Will Manzo from WPLG. Will, if you have a question for Coach Diaz.
I do. Hey, Coach, it's good to see you if you can hear me. Your thoughts on the schedule? I know Blake had mentioned it's kind of an aspirational thing, having 11 games, 10 ACC games, but your thoughts on the way the schedule looks and playing so many conference games and just the path ahead.
I think it's very exciting. We announced it to our players today, right before it went out through the league, and they were obviously very excited. I think it's going to be a unique deal for everybody, playing 10 straight in the league, but it makes every week a big deal. You're going to be challenged week in, week out, sort of not having divisions and kind of having everybody in sort of one big pile. I think it's really fun, and I think it's going to be perhaps the most like the in terms of a scheduling standpoint, the most like the National Football League than we've seen in college football, where you've got all these leagues and week in and week out, you're going to play someone that if you don't play well, you're going to get beat. So I think our guys are excited for that challenge.
Coach, we've got time for a few more questions. We'll go to Mike Cunio at WFOR. Mike, if you have a question for Coach Diaz.
Hey, Coach. Sorry to circle back to the COVID stuff, but just wondering, are any players, whether it be on the offensive line or maybe in the defensive secondary, who are working at different positions? Is there anyone specifically working at different positions just in the event you may have to pull someone out, the night before a game?
That's an outstanding question. There is not anyone right now necessarily working. Well, I mean, not dramatically different positions, I will say, but we have certainly spoken about it as a coaching staff and even with the players that this could be a year where, an offensive line, guards could play tackle, tackles could play guards could play center, all along the secondary. You could play a game with 4 safeties or with 4 cornerbacks, linebackers could go inside, outside. There's going to be some flexibility with that this year. And I think it's kind of exciting. We've sort of talked about that with our guys. It's just sort of, hey, wherever you can get on the field, so it's great opportunities for players, great opportunities for young players.
Coach, we have Ruthie Polinsky from WTVJ. Ruthie, if you have a question for Coach Diaz.
Hey, Coach, thanks for doing this. Kind of a generic question, but I'm just curious if you could describe the attitude, the energy. How are guys feeling just coming into camp tomorrow? Is there a little bit of uncertainty, or is it kind of just, business as usual? We're pumped to be back.
It's unfair to call it business as usual. I mean, it's different. I mean, 2020 is different, and everybody gets that. I do think the walkthrough period we had helped with that, and then just what we've done is we've made sure we had every player on our team again meet one-on-one, either with their coach or with me, and look them in the eye and just say, "Tell us how you feel. Tell us what your concerns are, or do you feel good about playing? What can we do to ensure that you're most comfortable?" And so I think just talking to those guys eye to eye and face to face and getting all that, I think has really helped.
Coach, with David Wilson from the Miami Herald. David, if you have a question for Coach Diaz.
Hey, Manny, you used the word bubble earlier, and obviously that's not something you can exactly do with kids going to class and stuff like that. But are there certain off the field rules you're going to have for guys this year differently than maybe in past years?
Well, to an extent, you can do that. I mean, we can all do that, right? We can all have our own little bubble. I mean, obviously we can't lock up in a hotel in Orlando for 3 months like the NBA, but I don't know. I mean, is your family not keeping a bubble? I mean, you obviously understand everyone you come into close contact with without a mask is inside your bubble. That's a choice. So I push back on that notion. We have the opportunity to keep a bubble, and people who you don't know that you're in close contact with. And if you're not in a mask, you just let that person not just into your bubble, potentially into our football team's bubble. So you know, in terms of the rules that we have, I mean, our players get it, but I mean, obviously we can't be around policing them when they're not inside of our building. But I will, again, that's where I say in the, you know, since again, mid-June, since we've all been back here, I am proud of our testing results, which have to suggest that, you know, that they've done the right thing when they've not been with us.
Coach, thank you very much for taking the time this afternoon. Good luck tomorrow with first practice, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from you soon. So thank you.